She didn't cry when the train left. She'd already cried enough to drown Boston. Clara Evers pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window of the stagecoach, watching the Kansas prairie give way to something harder, more unforgiving. Red dirt stretched endlessly toward mountains that looked like broken teeth against the sky. The other passengers, a preacher's wife and 2 merchants, had stopped trying to make conversation hours ago. They could smell failure on her like smoke. 28 years old, and she was running to the edge of the world. The letter folded in her reticule had promised work at a medical station in Redstone Hollow, signed by one doctor, Matthews, who needed an experienced nurse. She'd written back immediately, packed what little she owned, and bought a one-way ticket before anyone could ask why a woman with her training would leave civilization for a dust-blown town nobody had heard of. Nobody except those who needed to disappear. "Redstone Hollow, miss," the driver called down, his voice rough as the leather reins in his hands. "End of the line." Clara gathered her carpetbag and stepped down into air so dry it cracked her lips. The town sprawled before her like something that had given up trying wooden buildings weathered gray, their signs barely readable, a main street wide enough for 2 wagons to pass, though she saw only one, loaded with mining equipment and pulled by mules that looked as tired as she felt. The stagecoach office doubled as a telegraph station. Behind a scarred wooden counter, a man with pomade-slicked hair looked her up and down. "Help you?" "I'm looking for Dr. Matthews. I'm the nurse from Kansas." His eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. "Matthews. He's been gone near 3 months now. Packed up and headed back east. Said the town wasn't willing to pay for proper medical care." The words hit her stomach like cold stones. "But he wrote—" "3 months ago. Likely, mail's slow out here." The clerk's expression shifted from surprise to suspicion. "You come all this way without checking first." Heat climbed her neck despite the October chill. "Is there another doctor? Another medical station?" "Nothing official. Folks either heal on their own or ride 2 days to Cedar Falls." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "You got people here, family?" "No." "Money for a return ticket?" Clara's silence answered him. She'd spent everything getting here, betting on a promise that had evaporated like morning dew. The clerk made a sound between pity and dismissal. "McKinnon's Hotel might have work. Or try the saloon, though, a woman like you." He didn't finish, but his meaning hung in the air like dust. Clara lifted her chin, a gesture she'd perfected over years of disappointment. "Thank you for your time." Outside, the sun sat low and angry on the horizon. She'd need shelter before dark, but first, she had to try. The building that had housed the medical station wasn't hard to find. It was the only one with clean windows, now papered over from inside. A handwritten sign nailed to the door read, "Closed. Seek help in Cedar Falls." She stood there long enough for shadows to stretch across the street, her carpetbag growing heavier with each breath. Behind her, she heard the familiar sounds of a town settling into evening horses being stabled, shop doors closing, men's voices drifting from the saloon, normal sounds for everyone but her. "You the nurse?" Clara turned. A woman in a flour-dusted apron stood outside what appeared to be a general store, arms crossed, middle-aged, with the kind of face that had seen too much sun and too little joy. "I am Clara Evers." Figured. Word travels fast here. The woman's gaze was neither kind nor cruel, just measuring. "I'm Mrs. Holcomb. I run the store with my husband. You planning to stay?" "I'd hope to work with Dr. Matthews." "Well, he's gone, and he ain't coming back. We made that clear enough." "Mrs." Holcomb's mouth tightened. "Town council decided we couldn't afford charity cases. People who can pay ride to Cedar Falls, people who can't." She shrugged. "I see." Clara adjusted her grip on the carpetbag. "Could you direct me to McKinnon's Hotel?" "You got money for a room." "I'll inquire about work." "Mrs." Holcomb's laugh was short and sharp. McKinnon doesn't hire women, not for respectable work, anyway. She studied Clara's travel-worn dress, the careful mending at the cuffs. You got references, letters of recommendation. Clara thought of the letters she'd burned before leaving Kansas, the one that began with, "regretfully inform you," and ended with, "under the circumstances, we cannot continue our engagement." No respectable household would hire her without references, and she couldn't ask for them from Kansas. Not after what had happened. "No," she said simply. "Then you're wasting your time. This isn't a town that trusts easily. Miss Evers, we've had enough drifters and troublemakers. If you can't prove who you are—" Another shrug, eloquent in its dismissal. The store door opened, and a man emerged, presumably Mr. Holcomb. He whispered something to his wife, glancing at Clara with obvious concern. "Well, Mrs. Holcomb said, best of luck to you." They retreated inside, and Clara heard the decisive click of a lock. She walked down Main Street as windows lit with lamplight, each glow a reminder that she stood outside looking in. The hotel clerk McKinnon himself, a narrow man with suspicious eyes, didn't even let her finish asking about work. "No positions," he said flatly, "and rooms are cash in advance." The saloon beckoned with warmth and noise, but Clara knew better. A woman alone entering such a place sent a message she couldn't afford to send. Not again. By full dark, she had reached the edge of town where the buildings thinned and the desert began. A few scattered structures crouched against the night. A blacksmith's shop, a livery stable, and what might have been small houses or large sheds. Her feet ached, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. She'd had nothing since the jerky and hard biscuit at the noon stage stop. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A rider approached from the south, sitting easy in the saddle despite what looked like weeks of trail dust. As he passed through the spill of light from the livery stable, she saw broad shoulders, a hat pulled low, and hands steady on the reins. He slowed, studying her with the kind of careful attention men learned in places where strangers meant trouble. "Ma'am." He touched his hat brim. "You lost—" No. The lie came easily. She was exactly where she'd meant to be. It just wasn't where she'd hoped. He dismounted in one fluid motion, and she realized how tall he was, over 6 feet, with the kind of build that came from working cattle, not pushing papers. "Luke Callahan," he said, "just in from the Double Bar Ranch. You're standing in the dark at the edge of town with a carpet bag. Either you're lost or you're in trouble." "Neither, Mr. Callahan. I'm simply assessing my options." Even in the poor light, she caught what might have been amusement flickering across his weathered face. Options get thin after dark in Redstone Hollow. Her vision wavered, and she locked her knees to keep from swaying. When had she last eaten a real meal? 2 days ago. 3, the stage stops had been expensive, and she'd been hoarding her remaining coins. "Ma'am?" His voice seemed to come from far away. "When'd you last—" The ground tilted. Clara felt her carpet bag slip from numb fingers, heard Callahan curse softly. Then strong arms caught her before she hit the dirt, and she found herself held against a chest that smelled of leather and trail dust and something indefinably safe. "Easy now," he murmured. "I got you." She wanted to protest, to insist she was fine, but the words wouldn't come. The last thing she registered was being lifted as easily as a child, and a voice calling out, "Mrs. Barnes, open up. I got a woman here who needs help." Then darkness, merciful and complete, claimed her. Clara woke to the scent of lavender and lye soap, a combination that brought her back to childhood's sick rooms and her mother's careful hands. Sunlight filtered through gingham curtains, and for a moment she couldn't place where she was. Then memory crashed back the journey, the closed medical station, the cowboy who'd caught her when she fell. "Awake, are you?" A woman's voice, firm but not unkind. "About time. You've been sleeping near 14 hours. Clara turned her head on the pillow, a real pillow, stuffed with feathers, not the rolled coat she'd used on the stagecoach. The woman sitting beside the bed had steel-gray hair pinned severely back and eyes that missed nothing. Past 60. Clara guessed, with the kind of face that had earned its lines through purpose rather than merely time. "I'm Harriet Barnes. Hattie to most. You're in my spare room, such as it is." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to impose." "Hush. You didn't have much choice in the matter, being unconscious and all. Luke Callahan brought you here last night, said you'd collapsed at the edge of town." Hattie leaned forward, studying Clara with professional interest. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" Clara tried to remember. The days had blurred together on the journey. "I'm not certain. 3 days I was conserving funds." "Conserving yourself into a grave. More like—" Hattie stood, smoothing her apron. "There's broth on the stove and bread that's only a day old. You'll eat before we discuss anything else." The older woman left, and Clara took stock of her surroundings. The room was small but clean, with whitewashed walls and a rag rug on the floor. Her carpet bag sat in the corner, seemingly untouched. Through the window, she could see a vegetable garden struggling against the desert climate, each plant a small act of defiance. She rose carefully, pleased when the room stayed steady. Her traveling dress hung on a peg, brushed clean. Someone, Hattie, presumably had loosened her corset and removed her boots while she slept. The intimacy of it brought heat to her cheeks, but gratitude overwhelmed embarrassment. In the main room, she found a kitchen combined with living space, every inch utilized with military precision. Hattie ladled broth into a bowl and set it on the scrubbed table along with thick slices of brown bread. "Eat slow," she commanded. "Your stomach's not ready for much." Clara obeyed, the first spoonful of broth tasting like salvation. "Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. I'll repay your kindness as soon as I secure employment." Hattie snorted. "Employment? In Redstone Hollow? You might as well plan to repay me with fairy gold." She sat across from Clara, her expression softening slightly. "Luke told me you came here expecting to work with Doc Matthews. Poor planning on your part. His letter was dated 3 months ago. I responded immediately and came as quickly as I could arrange." "From Kansas," he said. Clara nodded, concentrating on her soup. Running from something or to something, the question hung between them like a challenge. Clara met the older woman's gaze. "Does it matter?" "In this town, yes." Hattie poured water from a pitcher, her movements economical. "Redstone Hollow has opinions about women who show up alone. No wedding ring, no family, no references. Those opinions aren't charitable." "I'm a trained nurse. I can help people." "Can you now?" Hattie's smile held no humor. "Tell me, Miss Evers, it is Miss, how long did you train?" 3 years at St. Mary's Hospital in Topeka. I graduated with commendations." "And then—" Clara's hands tightened on the spoon. "I worked there for 4 more years. Until—" The bread turned to sawdust in her mouth. She forced herself to swallow. "Until I couldn't anymore." Hattie studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if Clara had answered completely. "I was a nurse too. During the war, learned more about gunshot wounds and gangrene than any Christian woman should know." She absently rubbed her left arm. "Came out here in '67 with my husband. He died 5 years later, mining accident. I stayed because where else would I go?" "I'm sorry for your loss." "Ancient history now." Hattie waved dismissively. "Point is, I know what it means when a trained nurse leaves a good position and runs to the edge of nowhere. I won't ask for details, your business is your own. But this town—" She shook her head. "They barely tolerate me, and I've been here over 20 years. A newcomer with secrets. You'd have better luck teaching a cactus to bloom roses." Clara pushed the empty bowl away. "Then what do you suggest I do?" "Smart thing, scrape together coach fare and leave. Find another town. One that needs a nurse bad enough not to ask questions." "And if I can't afford to leave?" Hattie's laugh was dry as desert wind. Then you're in the same boat as half the souls in Redstone Hollow stuck here because anywhere else costs money we don't have. A knock interrupted them. Hattie rose to answer, returning with Luke Callahan. He'd cleaned up since the night before, fresh shirt, face shaved, though the shadow of sleeplessness marked his eyes. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. Miss Evers, good to see you upright. Mr. Callahan. Clara stood, acutely aware of her disheveled state. I owe you thanks for your assistance last night. No debt there. Anyone would have done the same. That, Hattie said dryly, is where you're wrong, Luke, but it's nice you think so. She looked between them. You here for a reason, or just checking on your good deed? Luke shifted his weight, a man more comfortable on horseback than in parlors. Actually, yes, word's gotten around about Miss Evers. Holcomb's store, McKinnon's hotel, they're all talking. Of course they are, Hattie muttered. Thought she should know what's being said. He addressed Clara directly, his gray eyes serious. They're calling you a runaway. Some say from a husband, others from... Worse, McKinnon's telling folks you tried to get work at his hotel last night, implying things about what kind of work you were seeking. Heat flooded Clara's face. I asked about chambermaid positions. I know. Luke's voice held no judgment. But McKinnon profits from gossip as much as room rentals. By noon, half the town will believe you're a... He stopped, clearly searching for appropriate words. A fallen woman, Clara finished flatly. How efficient of them. Less than 24 hours. And my reputation is already decided. It's not right, Luke said, but it's how things are. Why warn me? Clara studied him with nurse's eyes, noting the calluses on his hands, the sun-weathered skin, the way he held himself ready to move but choosing stillness. You don't know me. For all you know, their assumptions could be correct. He met her gaze steadily. Maybe, but I've found assumptions are usually lazier than the truth. Hattie coughed, breaking the moment. Practical matters. Then, Miss Evers needs work, and this town needs medical care. But they'd rather suffer than accept help from someone they've decided to distrust. It's a puzzle. What about unofficial work? Luke suggested. People who can't afford Cedar Falls but need help. You mean the Mexicans at the mining camp? The colored families on the south side? The working girls at Ruby's? Hattie's tone was sardonic. Yes, I'm sure tending to them will improve Miss Evers' standing in town. They need help same as anyone, Luke said quietly. More than most, Hattie agreed. But it won't pay. They trade in vegetables and mending, not cash money. Clara felt the walls of her situation closing in. No money, no prospects, no references she could use. The weight of her choices settled on her shoulders like a lead cape. I could write to St. Mary's, she said, knowing even as she spoke how futile it was. Perhaps they'd send a limited reference. Don't, Hattie's voice was sharp. Whatever happened there, asking them to put it in writing won't help. Trust me on this. Luke cleared his throat. There might be another way. Temporary, at least. He turned to Clara. The double bar where I work, we're heading into winter gathering. Cookie could use help feeding the crew. It's not nursing work, but it's honest pay and meals included. A cattle ranch, Clara tried to picture it. I've never... Doesn't matter. Can you cook? Basic meals, yes. Then you can learn the rest. It's 2 weeks of work, maybe 3, enough to earn stage fare to somewhere else. If that's what you want. Luke Callahan, you know perfectly well what bringing a woman to cow camp will cause. Hattie protested. Those men haven't seen a female in months. They'll behave or answer to me. His quiet certainty suggested this wasn't an idle threat. Besides, Cookie runs the camp kitchen like a general. Nobody crosses him. Clara weighed her options, stay in town where she was already branded, or risk the unknown of a cattle camp. Neither appealed, but only one offered payment. When would I need to start? Tomorrow, if you're able. We head out at dawn. Then I accept with gratitude. Luke nodded, looking almost relieved. I'll let Cookie know. Meet you here at sunrise. He settled his hat back on his head, touched the brim to both women, and left. Hattie shook her head. That boy's got more kindness than sense. Always has. You know him well. Delivered him, actually, 32 years ago this December, in a blizzard that killed half the county's cattle. His mother died in the birthing, and his father. She trailed off. Well, some men aren't built for raising children alone. Luke practically raised himself, working ranches since he was 12. Good man, but solitary. Picks his battles careful-like. Clara absorbed this information, filing it away with her nurse's habit of collecting patient histories. And now he's picked mine. Seems so. Hattie began clearing the table. Question is, why Luke Callahan doesn't usually involve himself in other people's troubles? Clara had no answer. She barely knew the man, just the impression of steady hands and a voice that made safety seem possible. But she'd trusted first impressions before, and they'd led her here, to the edge of the world with nothing but the clothes on her back and the kindness of strangers. Still, what choice did she have? That afternoon, while Hattie visited neighbors, Clara inventoried her meager possessions. 3 dresses, all showing wear. Undergarments mended past respectability. Her nurse's apron, carefully folded with the few medical instruments she'd managed to keep scissors. A thermometer. Rolled bandages. A Bible from her mother. Pages soft with handling. No jewelry, she'd sold her mother's cameo for stage fare. Nothing that spoke of who she'd been before Kansas, before the mistake that had cost her everything. She was nobody now, which perhaps was what she deserved. But even nobodies needed to eat, needed work, needed a place to lay their heads that wasn't the cold ground. Tomorrow she'd ride into the desert with a stranger, trusting his word that she'd be safe among rough men who hadn't seen a woman in months. It was madness, probably. But then, coming to Redstone Hollow had been madness too, and she'd survived that. So far, as the sun set, painting the desert the color of dried blood. Clara Evers sat in a borrowed room in a borrowed dress, preparing to borrow yet another life, this time as a cook's helper at a cattle camp, wherever that might lead. It couldn't be worse than where she'd been, she hoped. The cattle camp had been a salvation of sorts. 2 weeks of dawn-to-dark work, feeding 30 hungry cowboys who treated her with surprising respect, partly due to Cookie's iron rule, mostly due to Luke's quiet presence. She'd earned enough for stage fare to anywhere, but when the time came to leave, Hattie had made an offer. Stay here, the older woman had said simply. I need help, and you need a roof. We'll work out the particulars as we go. That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, Clara occupied the narrow back room of Hattie's house, earning her keep by helping with patients who came to the back door, always the back, never the front, as if needing medical help was something shameful. Hold him steady, Clara murmured, cleaning a gash on young Tommy Martinez's forehead. The 8-year-old had fallen from a fence, and his mother had brought him to Hattie's after the town doctor refused them service. No credit for Mexicans. Doctor, Pritchard had said, though everyone knew the Martinez family owned their small ranch free and clear. It wasn't about money. You're doing fine, brave boy, Clara told Tommy in the smattering of Spanish she'd learned at the camp. His mother clutched rosary beads, whispering prayers. Hattie watched from the doorway, nodding approval. Clean work, you've got good hands. Later, after the Martinez family left with profuse thanks and a jar of preserved peaches, their form of payment, Hattie made coffee strong enough to float horseshoes. Word's getting around, she said, about you helping folks. Some don't like it. They don't like much about me already. Clara cleaned her instruments carefully. At least now I'm useful. Usefulness doesn't equal acceptance in Redstone Hollow. Sometimes it breeds more resentment. Hattie's expression was troubled. Sarah Holcomb came by yesterday while you were at the Mercantile. Said some of the town ladies are talking about standards and proper credentials. Clara's hand stilled. Meaning they don't like an unmarried woman with no references treating their neighbors, even the ones they won't treat themselves. The familiar knot of anxiety tightened in Clara's stomach. It was starting again, the whispers, the suspicion, the gradual closing of doors. Just like in Kansas. I should go, she said quietly, before I cause you trouble. Horsehair. Hattie's profanity was mild but heartfelt. This is my house, and I'll keep who I please. Besides, winter's coming, bad time to travel, worst time to arrive somewhere new. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the evening sounds of the town. Somewhere a dog barked, and closer, someone played a fiddle with more enthusiasm than skill. Hattie, Clara asked suddenly, why did you really ask me to stay? The older woman was quiet so long Clara thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, because I remember what it's like to have nowhere to go, and because... She hesitated. I'm getting old. These hands don't work like they used to. Having someone young, trained, someone who sees patients as people instead of problems that's worth fighting for. A knock interrupted whatever Clara might have said. Hattie frowned. Patients rarely came after dark unless it was dire. Luke Callahan stood at the door, hat in hand, sleeve torn and darkly stained. Sorry to bother you, ma'am, but I could use some help. Land sakes, Luke, get in here. Hattie ushered him to the kitchen. Clara, bring the medical kit. In better light, Clara could see the damaged knife slash across his left forearm, not deep but bleeding freely. His shirt was ruined, and bruises darkened his jaw. Let me guess, Hattie said dryly. You were discussing philosophy at the saloon. Something like that. Luke's voice held grim amusement. Few boys from the Rocking J decided Jim Washington shouldn't drink at the same bar as white folks. I disagreed. Clara began cleaning the wound, noting how he didn't flinch despite what must be considerable pain. Jim Washington the blacksmith. His son, Daniel, just back from the army, served with distinction. Not that it matters to some. Hold still, Clara murmured, examining the cut. You're lucky. Another inch and it would have hit something vital. Didn't feel lucky when 3 of them jumped me. 3? Hattie shook her head. Boy, you've got to stop trying to fix the world with your fists. Wasn't trying to fix anything, just making sure Daniel got to finish his drink in peace. Clara began suturing, her movements precise despite her awareness of Luke's steady gaze. She'd treated countless men at the hospital, but something about this one, his quiet strength, perhaps, or the way he fought battles that weren't his made her hands want to tremble. There, she said finally, tying off the last stitch. Keep it clean and dry. Come back in a week to have the sutures removed. Yes, ma'am. He flexed his fingers experimentally. Good as new. What do I owe you? Nothing, Hattie said firmly. Fighting for fairness pays its own debts here. Luke reached into his pocket anyway, pulling out several silver dollars. For your medical supplies. Then, I know they don't come free. Before either woman could protest, he'd set the money on the table and retrieved his hat. At the door, he paused, looking back at Clara. Thank you. You've got a gentle touch. Heat rose in her cheeks. It's my training, nothing more. Maybe. His smile was slight but warm, still worth appreciating. After he left, Hattie chuckled. That boy's smitten. Don't be ridiculous. Clara busied herself cleaning up, avoiding Hattie's knowing look. He's simply polite. Luke Callahan's many things, but simple isn't one of them. Mark my words. Another knock cut her off. This time, Hattie's frown was deeper. Grand Central Station tonight. But it wasn't a patient. Reverend Aldridge stood at the door, thin and severe in his black coat, accompanied by 2 women Clara recognized from Sunday services, Mrs. McKinnon and Mrs. Holcomb. Mrs. Barnes. The Reverend began without preamble. We need to discuss the situation with your guest. Hattie's spine straightened. It's late for social calls. Reverend, this isn't social. Mrs. McKinnon's voice could have curdled milk. It's about maintaining proper standards in our community. Perhaps you'd better come in, Hattie said coolly, though I warn you, I've no patience for lectures in my own home. They filed in like crows, perching on the edges of chairs as if full contact might contaminate them. Clara stood by the medical cabinet, acutely aware of her blood-stained apron. Miss Evers. Reverend Aldridge addressed her directly. We've become aware that you're practicing medicine without proper credentials. I'm a trained nurse. Without proof. Mrs. Holcomb interrupted. No letters of reference, no documentation. For all we know, you could be anyone. She's helping people, Hattie said sharply. People your husband turns away from his store. Mrs. Holcomb. Those people have their own ways of handling illness. Mrs. McKinnon sniffed. They don't need interference from someone of questionable background. Clara felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling from Kansas when the accusation started. My background is precisely the issue. Reverend Aldridge's eyes were cold. An unmarried woman arrives alone, no family, no connections, no explanation. Now she's treating our citizens without oversight. It's inappropriate and potentially dangerous. Dangerous? Hattie laughed harshly. More dangerous than letting children die of fever because their parents speak Spanish. More dangerous than infection spreading because someone can't afford doctor. Pritchard's fees. That's not the point. Mrs. McKinnon insisted. We have standards. You have prejudices, Clara said quietly, surprising herself. You'd rather see people suffer than accept help from someone you've decided is beneath you. Silence fell like a hammer. Mrs. Holcomb's face flushed red. How dare you? She dares because she's right. Hattie stood, moving to Clara's side. Now, you've said your piece. My house, my rules. Clara stays. Reverend Aldridge rose, his expression thunderous. Mrs. Barnes, you've been a pillar of this community for years. Don't let this woman destroy your reputation. My reputation survived my husband's death, survived 20 years of your gossip, and it'll survive this. Hattie moved to the door, opening it pointedly. Good evening. They left in a rustle of offense and muttered threats about consequences. When the door closed, Clara sank into a chair, shaking. I'm poison, she whispered. Everywhere I go. Stop that! Hattie's voice was fierce. You're a skilled nurse who made some mistake back in Kansas. No, don't deny it. We all have our ghosts. Difference is, yours are fresher. They'll make your life miserable because of me. My life's been miserable since William died. At least now it's miserable with purpose. Hattie poured 2 glasses of medicinal brandy. Besides, you're not alone in this. Luke Callahan's taken an interest. And he's got more influence than those vultures realize. The Mexican families, the colored folks, the miners they remember who helps when they're hurting. That counts for something. Clara sipped the brandy, feeling it burn away some of the cold fear. In Kansas, it didn't count for anything. This isn't Kansas. Hattie's smile was grim but determined. This is Redstone Hollow, where stubbornness is a virtue and spite keeps us warm in winter. You'll see. That night, Clara lay on her narrow cot, staring at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, she could hear Hattie moving about, preparing for bed. Normal sounds of a normal evening, except nothing felt normal anymore. She thought about Luke's eyes when she'd stitched his wound gray as storm clouds, but warmer. Thought about Tommy Martinez's trusting face, his mother's grateful tears. Thought about the Reverend's cold condemnation and Mrs. McKinnon's sneering disgust. In Kansas, she'd run when the accusations grew too loud. Here, she had nowhere left to run. More importantly, she had Hattie. who stood like a weathered oak against the town's judgment. And maybe, though she hardly dared think it, she had Luke, who fought other people's battles with his fists and looked at her like she was worth defending. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had in months. Clara pulled the thin blanket higher and closed her eyes, trying not to think about what tomorrow would bring. In her experience, tomorrows had a way of being worse than today's, but sometimes, rarely, they surprised you. She fell asleep holding onto that rare possibility, while outside, Redstone Hollow settled into its nighttime silence, keeping its secrets and nursing its grudges for another day. Word traveled through Redstone Hollow like wildfire through dry sage. By the third morning after Reverend Aldridge's visit, Clara couldn't walk to the mercantile without feeling eyes on her back and hearing conversations stop mid-sentence. "That's her," someone whispered as she passed. "The nurse who sleeps at the Widow Barnes's place. I heard she was run out of Kansas for improper conduct with a doctor. My cousin says she practiced without a license, killed a patient. She's been setting her cap at Luke Callahan. Poor man doesn't know what he's dealing with." Clara kept her head high, purchased her meager supplies, thread, soap, and cornmeal, and ignored Mrs. Holcomb's pointed refusal to make eye contact. The prices seemed higher than last week, but she couldn't prove it. Outside, she nearly collided with Dr. Pritchard, the town's official physician. He was a small man with pomaded hair and soft hands that had never known hard labor. "Miss Evers," his smile was thin as paper. "A word." "Doctor," she nodded politely, though her stomach tightened. "I hear you've been treating patients without proper authority." "I've been assisting Mrs. Barnes with basic nursing care." "Ah." He rocked on his heels, clearly enjoying himself. "Well, I feel it's my duty to warn you that practicing medicine without proper credentials is not only unethical but illegal. I'd hate to see the sheriff involved." Clara met his gaze steadily. "I'm a trained nurse. Dr. Pritchard. I don't prescribe medicines or perform procedures beyond my training." "So you say, but without documentation." He shrugged eloquently. "Who's to know what you really are?" "The people I've helped know." His face flushed. "Those people should seek proper medical care." "From you." Clara couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "The man who turned away the Martinez boy because his family lacked ready cash. I run a practice, not a charity." "Then there's room for both of us in Redstone Hollow." "Wouldn't you say?" "Doctor—" Pritchard's smile vanished. "I think you'll find there isn't. Miss Evers, good day." He strode off, leaving Clara standing in the dusty street with her brown paper parcels. She was so focused on his retreating figure that she didn't notice Luke approaching until he spoke. "Making friends, I see." She startled, then managed a rueful smile. "I have a talent for it, apparently." Luke fell into step beside her, naturally taking the heavier parcels. He moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin, and Clara found herself oddly aware of the space between them, close enough for propriety, far enough to feel the absence. "Pritchard's worried," Luke said. "You're showing him up. Half his patients can't pay his fees, and the other half don't trust him. Then you come along, charging nothing or next to it, actually helping folks. I'm not trying to compete with him. Doesn't matter. Results speak louder than intentions." He glanced at her, noting the tension in her shoulders. "How bad has it gotten?" Clara considered lying, then decided against it. The whispers are growing louder. "Yesterday, Mrs. Patterson crossed the street to avoid me. This morning, I found a note slipped under Hattie's door suggesting I seek employment elsewhere." Luke's jaw tightened. "Anonymous, I suppose." "Of course." They walked in silence until they reached Hattie's house. Luke set the parcels on the porch but didn't immediately leave. Instead, he studied Clara with those storm cloud eyes that seemed to see too much. "You could go," he said quietly. "I'd help with stage fare. Find somewhere fresh, where the talk hasn't started." "Is that what you think I should do?" I think—" He removed his hat, running fingers through dark hair. "I think you've got more steel in you than folks credit, but steel can break if the pressure's too much." Clara thought of Kansas, of the moment she'd decided to run rather than fight. The memory tasted bitter as alkaline water. "I'm tired of running." "Then don't." His voice was firm. "But if you stay, it'll get worse before it gets better. This town doesn't forgive easily." "Does it forgive at all?" Luke's smile held no humor. "Ask me in 20 years. I'm still waiting to find out." That evening, Clara discovered what Luke meant. She was returning from the Martinez ranch, where she'd checked on Tommy's healing wound, when she found a small crowd gathered outside Hattie's house. Her heart sank. "There she is," someone called out. Clara recognized several faces: Mrs. McKinnon, Mrs. Holcomb, Reverend Aldridge, and others who attended the same church, shopped at the same stores, lived the same narrow lives. Doctor. Pritchard stood slightly apart, trying to look reluctant but failing to hide his satisfaction. Hattie stood on her porch, arms crossed, facing them down like a general defending a fortress. "This has gone far enough. Harriet," Mrs. McKinnon was saying, "that woman is a corrupting influence." "On whom?" Hattie demanded. "The Mexican families she helps the colored folks you won't let through your front doors. Or maybe you mean she's corrupting Luke Callahan. Though last I checked, he was a grown man capable of choosing his own company. She has no moral standing in this community," Reverend Aldridge intoned. "An unmarried woman with no references, no family, no explanation for her presence." "Since when is being unmarried a crime?" Hattie shot back. "Half the men in this town arrived the same way, no family, no history, just looking for work. You didn't run them off." "That's different." Mrs. Holcomb insisted. "Men have reasons to start over. Women who run from their past." She let the implication hang. Clara pushed through the crowd, climbing the steps to stand beside Hattie. "If you have accusations to make, Mrs. Holcomb, make them plainly." The woman's face reddened. "Very well. I think you're a woman of loose morals who's fled some scandal and now seeks to practice your wiles on decent folk." "Based on what evidence?" "You need evidence, Doctor." Pritchard stepped forward. "You arrive unannounced. Attach yourself to our Luke Callahan at the first opportunity. Practice medicine without showing credentials. I've shown my nursing certificate to Mrs. Barnes. A document anyone could forge." "Then write to St. Mary's Hospital in Topeka," Clara challenged. "Verify my training." Silence fell. She'd called their bluff, and they knew it. Writing to Kansas meant waiting weeks for a reply, and it would prove her training was real, but it would also reveal why she'd left. And that truth might be worse than their speculation. "That won't be necessary." A new voice cut through the tension. Sheriff Masters pushed through the crowd, his weathered face impassive. He was an older man, fair-minded by reputation, though Clara had learned that fairness was relative in Redstone Hollow. "Sheriff." Reverend Aldridge seized the opening. "We're concerned about this woman practicing medicine without proper oversight." "Has she harmed anyone?" "Not yet." "Has anyone complained about her treatment?" Silence. "Then I don't see a legal issue." The sheriff turned to Clara. "But I'd advise you to be careful. Miss Evers, the law's one thing, public opinion's another." "She's a danger to moral decency," Mrs. McKinnon sputtered. "Last I checked, that wasn't a crime." Sheriff Masters tipped his hat. "Evening. Folks, I trust you'll all head home peaceable-like." The crowd dispersed slowly. Muttering, "Doctor," Pritchard lingered, pointing a finger at Clara. "This isn't over." When they were alone, Hattie sagged against the doorframe. "Well, that was pleasant." "I'm sorry." Clara felt the weight of it crushing her. "This is my fault." "Hogwash. This town's been looking for someone to blame for its own meanness long before you arrived." Hattie straightened. Come on, I've got stew on the stove, and we both need something stronger than coffee. Inside, they found an unexpected visitor. Luke sat at the kitchen table, a fresh loaf of bread and a jar of honey beside him. Figured you might need supplies, he said simply. Sarah Holcomb's likely to make shopping difficult for a while. Clara sank into a chair, overwhelmed. You don't have to. I know what I have to do. His voice was quiet but firm. This is what I choose to do. Hattie poured 3 glasses of whiskey from her medicinal supplies. To hell with the Temperance League, she muttered. They drank in silence, the day's ugliness slowly fading. Finally. Luke reached into his vest pocket and withdrew something that caught the lamplight. Found this at the smithy today. He placed the object on the table, a simple brass bell, the kind that might hang on a shop door. Daniel Washington made it. Said it's for your medical office, when you're ready to hang out a shingle. Clara touched the bell gently, her throat tight. But I don't have an office. You will. Luke's certainty was unshakable. This town needs you, even if they're too proud to admit it. And some of us, he paused, color rising in his weathered cheeks. Some of us see your worth clear enough. Their eyes met across the table, and Clara felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the fear that had lived there since Kansas. Hattie coughed delicately and busied herself at the stove, but Clara caught her small smile. Thank you, Clara whispered. Luke nodded, standing. I should go. Early start tomorrow. At the door, he turned back. That bell, don't let it gather dust too long. After he left, Clara sat holding the brass bell, feeling its weight. Such a small thing, but it represented something larger: faith, perhaps hope, a future where she might be more than the sum of her mistakes. He's right, you know, Hattie said, serving up bowls of stew. This town does need you. The Mexican families, the colored folks, the ones too poor for Pritchard, they need someone who sees them as people, not problems. But the cost to you. What cost my reputation? Hattie laughed. Child, I'm a 60-year-old widow who's outlived most of her critics. What are they going to do? Gossip me to death. Clara managed a smile. You're braver than I am. No, just older. Time teaches you what matters and what's just noise. Hattie reached across the table, squeezing Clara's hand. You've got healing hands and a good heart. Don't let small-minded people make you forget that. That night, Clara placed the brass bell on her windowsill where moonlight could find it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new whispers, new tests of her resolve. But tonight, she had a roof over her head, a friend who stood by her, and somewhere out there, a quiet cowboy who saw her worth. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to keep going. And in Redstone Hollow, keeping going was its own kind of victory. The sound came just after midnight desperate pounding that shook Hattie's front door. Clara was out of bed before fully awake, her nurse's instincts responding to the universal rhythm of emergency. Please, a woman's voice, high with panic. Please, I need help. Clara reached the door first, yanking it open to find Martha Sullivan on the porch. The woman who'd crossed the street to avoid her just days ago now stood clutching a small bundle, her face streaked with tears. My boy, he can't breathe right, please. Clara didn't hesitate. Bring him in. The child, perhaps 4 years old, wheezed with each labored breath. His lips held a bluish tinge that sent alarm through Clara's system. She laid him on the kitchen table, loosening his nightshirt. How long has he been like this? Since supper. I thought it was just a cold, but it kept getting worse. Martha's voice broke. Hattie appeared with the medical kit. Croup! Sounds like it? Clara listened to the child's chest, hearing the characteristic barking cough. We need steam, lots of it. While Hattie stoked the fire and set water boiling, Clara elevated the boy's head and shoulders. What's his name? Peter. Martha wrung her hands. I took him to Dr. Pritchard, but he said to come back in the morning with payment. Shh! Clara kept her voice calm despite her anger. Peter's going to be fine. We're going to help him breathe easier. She created a tent with a blanket, trapping steam from the boiling water. Within minutes, the child's breathing began to ease. The blue faded from his lips, replaced by healthy pink. Clara stayed beside him, monitoring each breath, adjusting the steam tent as needed. "Why?" Martha whispered. "After how I've treated you." "Because he needed help." Clara checked Peter's pulse again. "That's all that matters." Martha began crying in earnest then, guilty tears that spoke louder than words. "They said you were dangerous, said you'd corrupt our children, but you're the only one who—" She couldn't finish. "People say many things." Clara smoothed Peter's damp hair. "Few of them matter when a child is sick." They spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, keeping the steam flowing. By dawn, Peter was breathing normally, even managing weak smiles at Clara's gentle teasing. Martha dozed in a chair, exhausted by fear and relief. "You can take him home now," Clara said as morning light filled the room. "Keep him warm and quiet today. If the breathing troubles return, come immediately." Martha gathered her son, then paused. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing. But take care of your boy, Mrs. Sullivan. That's payment enough." Martha's eyes filled again. "I'm sorry. For believing them. For—" She gestured helplessly. "I'll tell people what you did, who you really are." After they left, Clara slumped at the table. Hattie pushed a cup of coffee into her hands. "That was well done," the older woman said, "though I doubt Martha Sullivan's word will carry much weight against the gossip mill." "I didn't do it to change minds." "I know," Hattie smiled. "That's what makes it matter." Word of the night's events spread quickly, as Clara discovered when she ventured to the mercantile that afternoon. The usual whispers followed her, but now they held a different tone. "Save the Sullivan boy. I heard—" Pritchard turned them away. "No money, no help." Maybe we were hasty in our judgment. One good deed doesn't erase a questionable past. Sarah Holcomb served her with rigid disapproval, but Clara noticed the prices had returned to normal. Small victories. Outside, she found Daniel Washington waiting by his father's smithy. The young man stood tall despite the healing bruises from his altercation at the saloon. He held something wrapped in burlap. "Miss Evers, heard what you did for the Sullivan boy. News travels fast. Always does." He handed her the bundle. "Pa and I made this. Thought you might need it." Inside the burlap was a small wooden sign, letters burned carefully into the grain. "C. Evers, nurse. All welcome." Clara's throat tightened. I don't have an office." "You will." Daniel's certainty echoed Luke's. "Folks are starting to see sense. Not all of them, but enough." That evening, Clara was restocking medical supplies when Luke arrived. He'd been at the Double Bar for a week, and she'd missed his steady presence more than she cared to admit. "Heard you had an eventful night." He set a package on the table, coffee beans and sugar, luxuries in Redstone Hollow. "Martha Sullivan's boy. Croup." Clara arranged bottles with careful precision, avoiding his gaze. "How was the ranch?" "Fine. Lost a few head to wolves, but nothing serious." He paused. "Clara, look at me." She did, finding concern in those storm cloud eyes. "The talk's getting uglier," he said. "Pritchard's spreading poison about you practicing beyond your training. Some folks are listening." "And others aren't." She told him about Daniel's sign, Martha's gratitude. "Maybe the tide's turning. Maybe." But Luke looked unconvinced. "Just be careful. Desperate men do desperate things, and Pritchard's seeing his income threatened." His warning proved prophetic. 3 nights later, Clara woke to the acrid smell of smoke. She stumbled from bed, coughing, to find the kitchen filled with haze. "Fire!" she shouted. "Hattie, fire!" They grabbed what they could: medical supplies, important papers, and fled. Outside, flames licked at the back wall where someone had piled oil-soaked rags against the wood. If Clara had woken minutes later, Luke appeared from nowhere, leading a bucket brigade from the nearest well. The fire died hard, leaving the back wall charred but intact. Sheriff Masters arrived as the last embers were doused. "Anyone see anything?" "I was asleep," Clara said, shivering despite the heat. "The smoke woke me." The sheriff examined the obvious arson evidence. This was deliberate. "Any idea who, Could be anyone," Hattie said bitterly. "Half the town wants us gone." "Accusations need proof," but the sheriff's expression was grim. "I'll ask around," but he shrugged eloquently. After he left, Clara stood staring at the damaged wall. Someone had tried to burn them out, maybe kill them, all because she dared to help people who needed it. "That's enough." Luke's voice was granite. "You're not staying here tonight." "We're not leaving our home," Hattie protested. "Not leaving, just sleeping elsewhere until we can post a watch." He turned to Clara. "Pack what you need. You're coming to my place." "That's not proper aid." "Neither is burning women in their beds." His tone brooked no argument. "I've got a spare room. Hattie, Mrs. Chen has space if you'll accept." Clara knew she should refuse. A single woman staying at a bachelor's home would pour oil on the gossip fire. But the alternative was sleeping in a house someone had tried to burn, jumping at every sound. "Just for tonight," she conceded. Luke's house sat at the town's edge, small but well kept. He gave her the bedroom, taking the floor in the main room despite her protests. Clara lay awake, acutely aware of his presence beyond the thin door. She could hear him moving occasionally, keeping watch. "Can't sleep," his voice came softly through the door. "No." A pause. "Want some coffee? I make it strong enough to float horseshoes, but it's hot." She found him by the stove, looking tired. They sat at his small table, hands wrapped around tin cups, not speaking. Sometimes silence said more than words. "Why do you keep helping me?" Clara asked finally. "It's cost you. I've seen how some men look at you now, like you're betraying them." Luke studied his coffee. "My mother died birthing me. Never knew her. But my father told me once that she was a healer, not trained, just knew things, herbs and teas and how to ease pain." He looked up. "Town turned on her when a child died despite her efforts. Called her witch, said she meddled in God's plan. My father stood by her, but the damage was done. The stress of it, the isolation, might have been what made the birthing so hard." Clara's heart ached. "Luke, I was too young to help her, but I'm not too young now." His gaze held hers. "You heal people. Clara, you see suffering and try to ease it. If this town can't value that, then this town is wrong. One man can't change a whole town's mind." "Maybe not," he smiled slightly. "But I can try. And I'm not alone. Daniel, his father, the Martinez family, Mrs. Chen, more people than you think see your worth. And you." The question slipped out before she could stop it. "What do you see?" Luke was quiet so long she wished she could take it back. Then, "I see someone strong enough to keep helping folks who spit at her, smart enough to save lives others write off, stubborn enough to stay when running would be easier." He paused. "Beautiful enough to make a man forget his words." Heat flooded Clara's face. "Luke." "I know. Wrong time, wrong place, wrong everything." He stood abruptly. "You should try to sleep. Tomorrow will be long." She returned to the bedroom, but sleep remained elusive. His words echoed in the darkness, beautiful enough to make a man forget his words. No one had called her beautiful since before Kansas, before everything fell apart. Tomorrow, she'd return to Hattie's house, face the damage and the whispers and the fear. But tonight, she was safe in the home of a man who saw her truly, who stood guard against the darkness. It was more than she'd dared hope for. It was almost enough to make her believe in new beginnings, even in a place as hard as Redstone Hollow. Almost. The rider arrived as Clara was cleaning the last of the fire damage from Hattie's wall. His horse was lathered with sweat, and panic etched deep lines in his sun-weathered face. "Need the nurse," he gasped. "Bad sickness at the Crooked Creek camp. Men dying." Clara recognized him, Tom Brennan, from the Northern Cattle Operation. "What kind of sickness?" "Fever, chills, can't keep nothing down. Started 3 days ago with one man, now half the camp's down." He swayed in the saddle. "Boss says he'll pay whatever you ask." "I don't need payment." Clara was already moving, gathering supplies. "How many men?" 30 in camp, 15 sick, maybe more by now." Hattie appeared in the doorway. "That's a day's ride in good weather. Look at those cloud storms coming." Clara continued packing. Quinine for fever, laudanum for pain, clean bandages, carbolic acid for sanitizing. "Then I'd better hurry." "You can't ride alone to a camp full of rough men." "I'll take her." They turned to find Luke in the doorway, already dressed for travel. He must have seen Brennan's arrival from down the street. "This isn't your problem," Clara protested. 15 sick men sounds like everyone's problem. He turned to Brennan. "You riding back with us?" "Soon as I water my horse." "No." Clara studied the exhausted man. "You're staying here. You're dead on your feet. And we don't need another patient. Draw us a map and rest." While Brennan sketched directions, Clara finished her preparations. She'd need enough supplies for 15 men, possibly more, with no idea what she was treating. Could be influenza, could be food poisoning, could be something worse. "This is foolish," Hattie muttered, but she helped pack anyway. "Storm's going to catch you on the trail. Then we'll ride wet." Clara secured her medical bag. "I can't let men die because rain makes me uncomfortable." Luke had brought 2 horses his own and a steady mare from the livery. "Can you ride?" "I'll manage." The first hour proved her a liar. Clara had ridden before, but not seriously, and never at the pace Luke set. Her legs ached, her back protested, and the gathering clouds promised misery ahead. "Need to rest?" Luke asked when they stopped to water the horses. "No." She refused to slow them down. Lives depended on reaching the camp. He studied her with those 2 knowing eyes, but said nothing. When they mounted again, he set a slightly easier pace. The storm hit as they entered the Badlands, a maze of arroyos and mesas that looked like God's own fury had carved them. Rain fell in sheets, turning the trail to mud. Lightning split the sky, thunder following close enough to feel in their bones. "There," Luke pointed to an overhang in the rock face. "We'll shelter until the worst passes." They huddled under the ledge, horses crowded close. Clara shivered as water dripped from her hat brim. Luke pulled off his duster and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You'll freeze," she protested. "I'm used to it." He built a small fire from dry wood cached under the rocks. Clearly others had sheltered here before. "How bad do you think it is, the sickness?" "Without seeing them, hard to say. The symptoms could indicate several things." She held her hands to the flames. "If it's spreading that fast, probably influenza or something waterborne." "Can you help them?" "I'll do everything I can." She met his gaze. "But Luke, if it's something serious, 15 men, limited supplies. I'm just one nurse." "You're more than that." His quiet confidence warmed her more than the fire. "I've seen you work miracles with less." The storm passed, leaving them to navigate muddy trails in gathering darkness. Luke led with the sureness of a man who'd spent his life reading the land. Clara focused on staying in the saddle, ignoring the screaming protests from muscles unused to such punishment. Full dark had fallen when they saw lights ahead, lanterns marking the Crooked Creek camp. As they approached, Clara could hear it, the sound of suffering, coughs, groans, the restless movement of sick men. "Thank God," the camp foreman rushed to meet them. "It's gotten worse. 2 more down since Brennan left." Clara dismounted, legs nearly buckling. "Take me to the sickest first." The camp was organized chaos. Sick men lay in bedrolls under a canvas lean-to, while the healthy ones hovered helplessly. Clara moved among them with quick efficiency, checking symptoms, asking questions. "When did this start? What did the first sick man eat? Where do you get your water?" The answers painted a clear picture. The illness had started after they'd moved camp to a new water source, a seemingly clear pool that Clara immediately suspected. "No one drinks from that pool anymore," she ordered. "Boil all water for drinking and cooking. The pool's contaminated." But it looked clean. "Cholera doesn't care how water looks." The word sent fear through the camp. Clara raised her voice. "This isn't cholera, the symptoms are wrong. But it's serious enough. We need to separate the sick from the healthy immediately." Luke worked alongside her without being asked, helping move men, building fires to boil water, following her directions with quick intelligence. Clara lost herself in the work administering medications, cleaning men too weak to care for themselves, forcing fluids into resistant patients. "You need to rest," Luke said sometime past midnight. "You're swaying on your feet." Later, she mixed another dose of medicine. "That man's fever needs to break first." But Luke was right. Exhaustion pulled at her like lead weights. She'd been working for hours after a brutal ride, and her body had limits. When she stumbled over a water bucket, Luke caught her arm. "That's enough. You're no good to them unconscious." He guided her to a relatively quiet corner where someone had laid out blankets. Clara meant to protest, but the moment she sat, her body betrayed her. She was asleep before her head hit the makeshift pillow. She woke to pale dawn light and the sound of laughter confused. She sat up to find the camp transformed. Men who'd been deathly ill were sitting up, sipping broth. Others moved about slowly but steadily. "Morning, miracle worker." The foreman grinned at her. "Whatever you gave them worked. Fevers broke during the night." Clara checked each patient, amazed at the improvement. The contaminated water had caused severe intestinal distress, but nothing more deadly. With proper care and clean water, they'd recovered quickly. "Where's Luke?" she asked, realizing she hadn't seen him. "Rode out before dawn to check the new water source upstream. Said to let you sleep." She found him an hour later, returning with full canteens. "Clean spring 2 miles north," he reported. "Should serve until you can purify the pool." The foreman pumped Luke's hand, then Clara's. "You saved us. Name your price." "Just keep boiling your water," Clara said, "and maybe think about hiring a camp cook who knows about sanitation." They tried to press money on her anyway. These rough men who'd watched their friends suffer now looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Clara finally accepted enough to replace the medical supplies she'd used. Nothing more. "You're bad at business," Luke observed as they prepared to leave. "Good thing I'm not in it for the money." The ride back was slower, both exhausted from the night's work. The storm had passed, leaving crystal-clear skies and air that smelled of sage and rain. Clara's body ached in places she'd forgotten existed, but satisfaction warmed her better than sunshine. "Thank you," she said as they stopped to rest the horses. "For taking me, for helping, for—" She gestured helplessly. "Everything." Luke dismounted and came to help her down, his hands steady on her waist. For a moment, they stood close, the space between them charged with possibility. "Clara," his voice was rough, "I need to say something." "Luke?" "No, let me finish." He didn't step back, but he dropped his hands. "What you did back there riding through that storm, working yourself to exhaustion for men who aren't nothing to you, that's the kind of courage I've rarely seen." He paused. "But it scares me too, because someday you might push too hard, help someone you shouldn't, and—" "And what?" Clara challenged softly. "Someone might try to burn down my house, spread lies about me, try to run me out of town. That's already happening. This was different. Good men who needed help. But what if next time it's not what if? He broke off, frustration clear in every line of his body. Clara understood then. He wasn't trying to control her. He was afraid for her. This strong, steady man who faced down 3 fighters in a saloon was terrified of losing her to her own compassionate nature. "I can't change who I am," she said gently, "any more than you can stop defending people who need it." "I know." His smile was rueful. "Doesn't mean I won't worry. Then we'll worry about each other." The words slipped out, implying more than she'd meant to reveal. Luke's eyes darkened. "Clara Evers, you're going to be the death of me." "I'm a nurse," she said, attempting lightness. "I promise to revive you." He laughed then, the sound rich and warm. "Come on, let's get you home before Hattie sends out a search party." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. But Clara felt the shift between them, something acknowledged, if not acted upon. The careful distance they'd maintained was crumbling like a wall built on sand. It thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. As Redstone Hollow came into view, Clara realized something had changed inside her too. She'd ridden through a storm to save strangers, worked through exhaustion, succeeded against the odds. The woman who'd arrived here weeks ago, broken, running, afraid would never have managed it. Maybe she wasn't that woman anymore. Maybe Redstone Hollow, for all its judgment and cruelty, was forging her into something stronger. Or maybe it was the man riding beside her, who saw her strength when she couldn't see it herself. Either way, Clara Evers was done running. Whatever came next, she'd face it head on, even if it meant riding through more storms, literal or otherwise. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a special courier who looked as out of place in Redstone Hollow as a peacock among sparrows. Clara signed for it with trembling hands, recognizing the official seal of the town council. "What is it?" Hattie asked, pausing in her bread kneading. Clara broke the seal and read aloud, "Miss Clara Evers, you are hereby requested to appear before the Redstone Hollow Town Council at 2 o'clock this afternoon to address concerns regarding your continued residence and practice of medical procedures within our jurisdiction." "Requested," Hattie snorted. "That's a polite word for summoned." The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Word of the council meeting spread faster than wildfire, and by noon, Clara couldn't walk outside without feeling the weight of watching eyes. Some held sympathy, others satisfaction. Most simple curiosity about what drama would unfold. "You don't have to go," Hattie said as Clara dressed in her best remaining dress, a navy wool that had seen better days but still held respectability. "They have no legal authority." "They have the authority of public opinion." Clara pinned her hair severely back, aiming for professional rather than pretty. "If I don't appear, they'll use it against me." "Then I'm coming with you." "No." Clara squeezed the older woman's hand. "This is my fight." But when she arrived at the town hall, a grand name for a simple wooden building that doubled as a courthouse, she found she wasn't alone. Luke stood outside, dressed in his cleanest clothes, jaw set in determination. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "Yes, I did." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" Inside, the council had arranged themselves like judges at a tribunal. Mayor Hutchinson sat at the center, flanked by Reverend Aldridge, Dr. Pritchard, banker Theodore Morrison, and merchant Samuel Holcomb. The audience benches were packed misses, McKinnon and her gaggle of supporters on one side, and, surprisingly, a scattering of Mexican and colored families on the other. "Miss Evers," Mayor Hutchinson began without preamble, "you stand accused of practicing medicine without proper credentials, maintaining residence under false pretenses, and constituting a moral danger to our community." "Accused by whom?" Clara kept her voice steady. "By concerned citizens." He gestured toward Dr. Pritchard. "Doctor, please present your evidence." Pritchard stood, puffing with self-importance. This woman claims to be a trained nurse but provides no verifiable proof. She treats patients using methods that could endanger lives. Furthermore, her presence has created division in our community. Because she helps people you won't treat, Luke interrupted, earning a sharp look from the mayor. Mr. Callahan, you'll have your turn to speak. Additionally, Pritchard continued, her refusal to explain her departure from Kansas suggests scandal. A woman of good character doesn't flee without references. Have any of my patients complained? Clara asked. Has anyone been harmed by my treatment? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. Clara stood, addressing the room rather than just the council. I've treated dozens of people in the weeks I've been here. The Martinez boy's head wound, Mrs. Sullivan's son with croup, the men at Crooked Creek who would have died without intervention. Where were you, Dr. Pritchard, when they needed help? Counting his money, someone muttered from the back. Order! Mayor Hutchinson banged his gavel. Miss Evers, can you provide proof of your training? Clara had known this moment would come. She reached into her bag and withdrew a carefully preserved document. My nursing certificate from St. Mary's Hospital in Topeka. Pritchard snatched it, examining it with a magnifying glass as if hoping to find forgery. His face fell when he found none. This only proves training, not character. Reverend Aldridge interjected. Why did you leave Kansas? Why come here with no references, no connections? The room fell silent, waiting. Clara felt Luke tense beside her, ready to defend. But she touched his arm lightly. This was her truth to tell. I left Kansas because I refused to stay silent about a wrong. She lifted her chin, meeting each council member's eyes. A prominent doctor at the hospital forced his attentions on nurses. When he turned to me, I refused. When he persisted, I reported him. Gasps rippled through the audience. Mrs. McKinnon's face went pale. The hospital board chose to believe him over me. I was dismissed without references. My reputation destroyed by his lies. So yes, I came here hoping to start fresh, to use my skills to help people without the shadow of false scandal. Her voice grew stronger. But it seems scandal follows those who dare to stand up for themselves. A convenient story, Pritchard sneered, but his words lacked conviction. The truth often is inconvenient. Clara turned to the full room. I've hidden nothing about my work here. I've charged nothing for my services. I've gone where Dr. Pritchard wouldn't help those he deemed unworthy. If that makes me dangerous, then perhaps this town needs to examine what it values. I'd like to speak. Everyone turned as Maria Martinez stood, clutching her young son's hand. Her English was accented but clear. This woman saved my Tommy, Doctor. Pritchard said no credit. Go away. Miss Clara. She came. She helped. She asked for nothing. She looked directly at the council. What kind of town punishes mercy? The kind that maintains standards. Mrs. McKinnon snapped. Standards. Jim Washington, the blacksmith, rose from his seat. What standards said my boy couldn't get a drink after serving his country? Luke Callahan stood up for him, got cut for it, and Miss Evers stitched him up. That's the standard I want in this town. More voices rose. Patients Clara had treated, families she'd helped. The council looked increasingly uncomfortable as testimony poured forth. She delivered my baby when it came too fast for the doctor. Sat with my father all night when the fever took him. Taught me how to keep wounds clean so my boy's cut didn't fester. Enough. Mayor Hutchinson banged his gavel repeatedly. This is not a popularity contest. No, Luke said, standing slowly. It's about decency. He faced the council with the same steady courage he'd shown in every fight. You want to talk about moral danger? How about a doctor who turns away sick children for lack of payment? How about a minister who preaches charity but practices judgment? How about a town that would rather see people suffer than accept help from someone who made them uncomfortable? Mr. Callahan. Reverend Aldridge's voice was ice. Your defense of this woman suggests an inappropriate attachment. My defense of her suggests I have eyes to see and a mind to think. Luke's voice carried quiet authority. Clara Evers has shown more Christian charity in 6 weeks than half this room has shown in years. If you run her out, you don't hurt her, she'll find another town that values healing over hatred. You hurt yourselves, and everyone who needs care you're too proud to give. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. The council huddled, whispering furiously. Clara felt the room's tension like a living thing, pressing against her chest. Finally, Mayor Hutchinson cleared his throat. The council has reached a decision. While we find no evidence of actual harm done by Miss Evers, we believe her continued presence creates discord in our community. Therefore, we strongly encourage her to seek residence elsewhere. Encourage. Hattie spoke from the doorway where she'd been listening. Another polite word. You mean exile? We mean, the mayor said carefully, that sometimes the best choice for all concerned is a fresh start somewhere else. Clara felt something break inside her, not her spirit, but her last hope that Redstone Hollow might become home. She'd fought, she'd helped, she'd told her truth, and still they chose fear over compassion. You have your wish, she said quietly. I'll leave. No. Luke's single word cut through her resignation. He turned to face the room, and Clara saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Not just determination, but a kind of reckoning. She stays, he said simply, because if she goes, I go. The room erupted. Luke Callahan had been born here, worked the ranches since childhood, was woven into the fabric of Redstone Hollow like the red dust itself. Luke, you don't mean that. Mayor Hutchinson looked genuinely shaken. I mean every word. You want to know about inappropriate attachment. Reverend Fine, I care for this woman, not because she's pretty or available, but because she's good, because she sees hurt and tries to heal it, because she's brave enough to stand up to bullies, whether they're grabbing doctors in Kansas or sanctimonious councils in Redstone Hollow. He turned to Clara, his gray eyes holding hers. You deserve a town that fights for you. If they won't, I will. And if that means leaving the only home I've known, so be it. Clara couldn't breathe. The room spun around her, voices rising in argument, but all she could see was Luke steady. Stubborn Luke who just laid his life on the line for her. This is blackmail, Pritchard sputtered. This is choice, Luke corrected. Same choice you're forcing on her. Difference is, I know which side I'm choosing. As do I. Daniel Washington stood. If Miss Clara goes, you lose my father's smithy services. And my store. The voice surprised everyone, Timothy Chen, the Chinese merchant who rarely spoke at town meetings. Miss Clara treated my daughter when she burned her hand. Treated her like any other child. That matters. One by one, others stood, not many, but enough. The Mexican families, the colored residents, the poor whites who worked the mines, the people Redstone Hollow tolerated but never embraced, now embracing the woman who'd embraced them. Mayor Hutchinson looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. The council huddled again, voices rising in heated debate. Clara stood frozen, overwhelmed by the support she'd never expected. This is insane, Mrs. McKinnon shrieked. You'd split the town over one fallen woman. The only thing fallen here is your compassion. Hattie shot back. Finally, the mayor banged his gavel with defeated finality. The council recommends that Miss Evers be allowed to continue residence on a provisional basis. Any complaints about her conduct or medical practice will result in immediate review. It wasn't victory, not really, but it was survival. And in Redstone Hollow, that counted for something. As the crowd dispersed, arguing among themselves, Luke guided Clara outside, in the relative quiet of the street. She finally found her voice. You can't leave your home for me. Wasn't bluffing. He studied her face with that intensity that made her pulse race. meant what I said inside. Every word. Luke. She didn't know how to finish. How to say that he'd just given her something she'd never had someone willing to fight for her. To choose her. To stand against the world beside her. We should get you home, he said gently. Hattie's probably wearing a groove in the floor. But Clara caught his hand, stopping him. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, the real me, not the rumors or the speculation, but the woman who rides through storms to save strangers. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. The woman who treats anyone who needs it. The woman too stubborn to let small minds drive her out. That woman's worth fighting for. Standing there in the dusty street, with half the town against her and an uncertain future ahead. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not for acceptance, Redstone Hollow might never fully embrace her, but for belonging, in whatever small way, with the people who mattered, with Hattie, who'd opened her door to a stranger, with the families who'd testified on her behalf, and with this man who'd offered to leave everything for her. It wasn't the fresh start she'd imagined when she'd stepped off that stagecoach. It was better, because this time, she wasn't alone. The sickness arrived with November's bitter wind, creeping into Redstone Hollow like a thief in the night. It started at the schoolhouse, little Emma Morrison complaining of headache and chills. By evening, 3 more children had fallen ill. By the next morning, it had spread to their families. Clara knew the signs immediately: influenza, the kind that could devastate a town in days. She was at the Morrison house when Dr. Pritchard arrived, medical bag in hand and disapproval etched on his face. "I'll handle this," he announced, not looking at Clara. "These are paying patients." "We need to work together," Clara said quietly. "This is bigger than pride, if it's what I think." "I don't need advice from you." He pushed past her to examine Emma. His methods were competent but cold, treating symptoms without seeing the larger pattern. Clara caught Mrs. Morrison's arm. "Isolate the sick. Boil all water and utensils. Keep the healthy children away from those showing symptoms." A doctor, Pritchard, said, "Dr. Pritchard is treating individuals. I'm trying to prevent an epidemic." By the 3rd day, 20 people had fallen ill. The schoolhouse closed. Then the church. Dr. Pritchard worked frantically. But he was one man trying to stem a tide when he collapsed at the Hutchinson house, felled by the same fever he'd been treating. Even his staunchest supporters began to panic. "Please." Martha Sullivan appeared at Hattie's door, the same woman who'd once scorned Clara. "My husband's burning with fever. Dr. Pritchard is sick himself. We have nowhere else to turn." Clara didn't hesitate. "Show me." The town that had tried to exile her now begged for her help. Clara moved from house to house, teaching prevention as much as treatment. Isolate the sick, maintain cleanliness, push fluids, simple measures that could mean the difference between recovery and death. "Why?" Sarah Holcomb asked when Clara arrived to treat her fevered daughter. "After how we treated you, why help us?" "Because that's what nurses do," Clara said simply, mixing medicine with practiced hands. "We heal, not just those who are kind to us, but those who need us." The work was exhausting. Clara barely slept, moving between patients in a kind of focused trance. Hattie worked beside her when her aging body allowed, and Luke appeared whenever he wasn't needed at the ranch, carrying supplies, building sick rooms, enforcing Clara's quarantine orders with quiet authority. On the 5th night, Clara found herself at the mayor's house. Hutchinson himself was ill, along with his wife and eldest son. Their younger children huddled in the kitchen, terrified. "Miss Evers," the mayor wheezed from his bed, "I owe you an apology." "Save your strength." Clara checked his pulse. Not unkind, but not warm either. "You'll need it to recover." "No, I need to say this." He gripped her hand with surprising strength. "I was wrong. About you. About what matters in this town. Clara mixed his medicine in silence. Deathbed conversions to tolerance were common enough, but they rarely survived recovery. Still, she treated him with the same care she gave everyone, because that was who she was. The fever peaked on the 7th day. Clara stood in Hattie's kitchen, trying to remember when she'd last eaten, when Luke caught her as she swayed. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse." "There are still houses I haven't—" "They'll wait an hour while you eat." He pressed a bowl of soup into her hands. "Clara, you've been going for days without stopping. Even you have limits." She wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. The spoon shook in her hand, and Luke had to steady it. They sat in silence while she ate, his presence solid and reassuring. "3 deaths so far," she said quietly. "Old Mr. Patterson, the widow Clearwater, little Joseph from the mining camp. 3 too many. Without you, it would be 30. Luke's voice was certain. "Maybe more. The whole town knows it." "Do they?" Clara's laugh was bitter with exhaustion. "Or will they forget the moment the crisis passes?" Luke didn't answer immediately. "Then, some will forget, some always do, but others will remember who stood by them in the dark. That matters." A commotion outside drew their attention. Reverend Aldridge stood on the porch, hat in hand, face haggard with worry. "My wife," he said without preamble. "She's taken ill. Please." Clara rose without hesitation, reaching for her medical bag. The reverend who'd condemned her now stood begging at her door. But she felt no satisfaction in the irony, only bone-deep weariness and the driving need to help. Mrs. Aldridge was indeed very ill, her fever dangerously high. Clara worked through the night, applying cool compresses, administering medicine, fighting for a woman who'd wished her gone. "I was so cruel," Mrs. Aldridge murmured in a moment of lucidity. "At the church meeting, the things I said—" "Hush." Clara smoothed her hair back. "Rest now." "No, I must. Forgive me, please." Clara met the woman's fevered eyes. "There's nothing to forgive. Now drink this." By dawn, the fever had broken. Reverend Aldridge wept openly, clutching Clara's hands. "I misjudged you terribly. How can I make amends?" "By remembering this feeling," Clara said quietly. "The next time someone different comes to town, the next time you're tempted to judge before you know, remember how it felt to need help from someone you scorned." The epidemic lasted 2 more weeks, but its back had been broken. The death toll stood at 5 tragic, but far less than it could have been. As families emerged from isolation, blinking in the winter sunshine, they looked at Clara differently. Not with warmth, exactly. Redstone Hollow wasn't built for sudden transformations, but with respect, with recognition, with the grudging acceptance that sometimes the people you try to drive away are the ones you need most. Dr. Pritchard recovered slowly, his arrogance dimmed by his brush with mortality. He appeared at Hattie's door on a cold December morning, thin and pale, but determined. "Miss Evers," he began formally, "I've come to, that is," he cleared his throat. "I've been a fool." Clara waited, saying nothing. "You saved this town, saved me, though I gave you no reason to." He reached into his coat, withdrawing an envelope. "I've written to the state medical board, recommending they recognize your nursing credentials. It's not much, but it makes your position here official." She took the envelope slowly. "Why?" "Because it's right. Because this town needs you more than it needs my pride." He attempted a smile. "Perhaps we could work together properly. I could use a skilled nurse in my practice." Clara considered. Working with Pritchard would mean legitimacy, steady income, acceptance. But "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully. "But I've made commitments to families who can't afford your fees. I won't abandon them." "Then perhaps a partnership." You continue serving those patients. I'll handle those who can pay, and we consult on difficult cases. It was more than she'd ever hoped for. I'll consider it. After he left, Hattie chuckled. Never thought I'd see the day, Pritchard humbling himself to anyone, much less you. People change, Clara said, though she wondered if they really did. Sometimes. That evening, Luke found her at the small cemetery at the town's edge. She stood before the 5 new graves, markers for those the fever had claimed. You did everything you could, he said softly. I know, but it never feels like enough. She leaned into his warmth. In Kansas, during my training, we lost a child to diphtheria. I held her while she died, and her mother asked me why God would take an innocent. I didn't have an answer then. I still don't. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe all we can do is fight the darkness when it comes. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You fought, Clara, harder than anyone. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the desert red and gold. The town below them bustled with renewed life shops reopening, children playing, the ordinary miracles of survival. What will you do? Luke asked. About Pritchard's offer? I don't know. Working with him would make things easier, but you've never chosen easy. She smiled at that. No, I suppose I haven't. For what it's worth, Luke said carefully. I think you should take it, not because you need his approval, but because this town needs both of you. Together, you could do real good. Clara turned to study him. When did you become so wise? Somewhere between watching you save my neighbors and falling in love with you. The words hung in the evening air like suspended stars. Clara's breath caught. Luke. I know, wrong time again. But Clara, we just came through hell, made me realize how short life is, how foolish it is to wait for perfect moments. He turned to face her fully. I love you, not despite your stubbornness or your calling or your complicated past, because of all of it, because of who you are. Clara felt tears sting her eyes, exhaustion, emotion, and something that might have been joy. I don't know how to do this. Love, trust. Not anymore. Then we'll learn together. His hand found hers. If you'll have me. Looking at him, this man who'd stood by her, fought for her, never asked her to be less than she was. Clara felt the last walls around her heart crumble. Yes, she whispered. His kiss was gentle, careful, as if she might startle and run. But Clara had done with running. She kissed him back with all the fervor of a woman who'd found home in the last place she'd expected. When they finally pulled apart, the first stars were appearing overhead. The town below glowed with lamplight, and Clara could imagine the families inside gathered around dinner tables, recovered and whole, telling stories of the fever that had nearly claimed them. She'd helped save them. The woman they'd tried to drive out had helped save them all. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a beginning. And for Clara Evers, who'd come to Redstone Hollow with nothing but hurt and hope, a beginning was everything. Spring came early to Redstone Hollow that year, painting the desert with unexpected color. Cacti bloomed in brilliant reds and yellows, and even the stubborn sage seemed greener. The town had survived winter and the fever, and with survival came a cautious optimism. They're planning a dance, Hattie announced over breakfast, her tone suggesting she'd reported a plague of locusts. A spring celebration at the church, to give thanks for our deliverance, according to Reverend Aldridge. Clara looked up from her medical journal. That sounds pleasant. Pleasant, Hattie snorted. It's politics. The good Reverend wants to show Christian unity after the Troubles, mend fences, as it were. And they're inviting everyone. That's the remarkable part. Everyone means everyone, the Mexican families, the colored folks, even the Chinese merchants. Course, whether everyone feels welcome is another matter. Clara returned to her reading, but her mind wandered. 3 months had passed since the fever, since Luke's declaration at the cemetery. They'd been careful since then, proper in public, stealing only moments of privacy. Luke would walk her home from patients. Their hands might brush as he helped her from a wagon. They might share coffee at Hattie's table with the older woman as chaperone. But the whole town knew. In a place as small as Redstone Hollow, secrets were luxury items nobody could afford. "You'll go, of course," Hattie said, not really asking. "I suppose I should. And you'll need a proper dress." Clara gestured at her worn navy wool. "This is proper enough?" "For nursing. Yes, for dancing with Luke Callahan while the whole town watches." Hattie's eyes twinkled. "I think not." Which was how Clara found herself in Mrs. Chen's small shop, being measured for a dress she couldn't afford with money she didn't have. "No charge. Mrs." Chen insisted when Clara protested. "You saved my daughter's hand. This is, how you say, investment in happiness." The dress was simple but beautiful soft green cotton that brought out the color in Clara's eyes, with modest lace at the collar and cuffs. Nothing scandalous, nothing to give the gossips ammunition, but something that made her feel like a woman rather than just a nurse. The night of the dance. Clara stood before Hattie's small mirror, nervous as a schoolgirl. "Stop fussing," Hattie commanded, adjusting Clara's hair one final time. "You look lovely." "I look like I'm trying too hard." "You look like a woman in love who's finally allowing herself to show it." Hattie's expression softened. "Be happy. Clara, you've earned it." The church hall had been transformed with paper flowers and lanterns. Tables groaned under the weight of potluck contributions, and Samuel Hutchinson's fiddle was already warming up. The crowd was indeed everyone ranchers rubbing shoulders with miners, proper church ladies eyeing the saloon girls with suspicion but not hostility, children of all colors racing between their parents' legs. Clara entered quietly, hoping to avoid notice, but that was impossible. Conversation stuttered as she passed. She heard her name whispered, saw the look, some approving, some not, all curious. Then Luke was there, appearing from the crowd like he'd been watching for her. He wore his best shirt, hair slicked back, boots polished to a shine. But it was his expression that stopped her heart wonder and pride and something deeper that made her cheeks warm. "Miss Evers," he said formally, aware of their audience. "You look beautiful." "Hey, Mr. Callahan." She accepted his offered arm. "You clean up well yourself." They made their way through the crowd, greeting patients and neighbors. Some conversations were stilted, but others surprised her with genuine warmth. Martha Sullivan squeezed her hand, eyes damp with gratitude. The Martinez family beamed at her like she'd hung the moon, even Mrs. McKinnon managed a tight nod of acknowledgement. "It's strange," Clara murmured to Luke as they found a quieter corner. "Like I'm being seen for the first time." "You're being seen differently," he corrected. "Before, you were the stranger with secrets. Now you're the woman who stayed when things got hard, who risked your life for theirs. That changes how people look at you." The fiddle struck up a lively tune, and couples began forming for a dance. Luke held out his hand. "I should warn you, I don't really dance," Clara said. "Neither do I, but maybe we can just sway." His smile was gentle, private, meant only for her. "So you don't feel alone?" She placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the floor. Other couples swirled around them in practiced patterns, but Luke kept their movements simple, a basic sway and turn that required no skill, only proximity. "People are staring," Clara whispered. "Let them. They'll talk." "They already do." His hand at her waist pulled her slightly closer. "Clara, I've spent my whole life in this town, kept my head down, minded my business, never gave them reason to notice me. Then you arrived, and suddenly I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Couldn't stand by. You changed me. I didn't mean to." "I know. That's what makes it matter." They turned slowly, and Clara caught glimpses of faces in the crowd, some disapproving, but others more than she'd expected, smiling. I'm tired of living for their approval, rather live for something real. The song ended, but Luke didn't release her immediately. For a moment, they stood there, his hands at her waist, hers on his shoulders. The whole world narrowed to the space between them. Then Reverend Aldridge cleared his throat nearby. Might I have a word? Miss Evers? Luke's jaw tightened, but Clara touched his arm gently. It's all right. The Reverend led her to a quieter spot near the refreshment table. He looked older than she remembered, worn by the winter's trials. I owe you more than an apology, he began without preamble. I owe you a debt I can never repay. You saved my wife when I'd given you every reason to let her suffer. I'm a nurse, Reverend. Personal feelings don't enter into it. But they do. That's what makes your actions all the more remarkable. He studied her with eyes that had lost some of their judgment. I've been thinking about Christ's words, love thy neighbor as thyself. Easy to preach, harder to practice. You showed me what it actually looks like. Clara didn't know how to respond to this unexpected humility. I wanted to tell you, he continued, that when you and Luke decide to marry and don't pretend that's not where this is heading, I'd be honored to perform the ceremony. The offer stunned her. Reverend, think about it. He patted her shoulder awkwardly. And know that you'll always be welcome in God's house. Both of you. He moved away, leaving Clara reeling. Marriage. The word sat in her mind like a bird afraid to land. She'd run from one failed engagement, carried those scars like stones. Could she trust again even Luke? She found herself outside, needing air. The night was cool and clear. Stars scattered like spilled salt across the sky. Behind her, music and laughter spilled from the church, the sound of a community healing. Overwhelming. She turned to find Luke. He'd followed her, of course. He always seemed to know when she needed space and when she needed presence. The Reverend offered to marry us, she said without preamble. Luke went very still. Did he now? I can't. Words failed her. How to explain the terror that gripped her at the thought of promises, of legal bonds, of giving someone that power over her again. Clara. Luke moved closer but didn't touch her. Look at me. She did, finding patience in his storm cloud eyes. I'm not him, he said simply. Whoever hurt you in Kansas, whoever made you run, I'm not him. I don't need papers to love you. Don't need ceremonies or witnesses or legal anything. I just need you. But the town? We'll talk either way. His smile was crooked. If you haven't noticed, I'm not much for caring what the town thinks anymore. Clara felt tears threaten. I'm broken. Luke, what happened in Kansas? It wasn't just the hospital. There was a man. We were engaged. When the scandal broke, when I needed him most, She swallowed hard. He said he couldn't marry a woman with a tainted reputation, said I'd brought it on myself by working, by being too independent, by refusing to just be quiet and accept. He was a fool. Luke's voice was fierce. And a coward. Maybe, but he was also right about some things. I am too independent. I do speak when I should be quiet. I can't just be a proper wife who keeps house and... Good. The interruption startled her. Clara, I don't want a proper wife. I want a partner, someone who challenges me, who sees needs and meets them, who rides through storms to save strangers. He finally touched her then, fingers gentle on her cheek. I want you, exactly as you are. The tears came then, months of fear and doubt washing away in the face of his certainty. Luke gathered her close, and she let herself be held, let herself feel safe. No rush, he murmured into her hair. No pressure. We've got time to figure it out. They stayed there, holding each other under the vast desert sky, while inside the dance continued. When they finally returned, Clara noticed something had shifted. The looks they received were different, not scandalized, but knowing, even approving. Mrs. Chen pressed a cup of punch into Clara's hands with a warm smile. Jim Washington's wife nodded approvingly. Even Sarah Holcomb managed something that might have been acceptance. As the evening wore on, Clara found herself genuinely enjoying the event. She danced with others a careful reel with Daniel Washington, a slow turn with elderly Mr. Martinez, who beamed at her like a grandfather. She helped serve refreshments, talked with patients about their health, felt almost like she belonged. Near midnight, as the crowd began to thin, Luke found her again. One more dance. This time, she didn't hesitate. They moved together more easily now. Her earlier self-consciousness faded. Around them, other couples danced young and old, established and courting, all part of the complex tapestry of town life. "Thank you," Clara said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me, for staying, for being patient with my fears." "Thank you," he replied, "for being worth waiting for." The music slowed. Samuel's fiddle singing sweetly in the lamplit hall. Clara rested her head against Luke's shoulder and let herself imagine a future not perfect, not without challenges, but real. A future where she had a place, a purpose, and a man who loved her not despite her strength but because of it. Inside the church, where months ago they'd tried to drive her out, Clara Evers danced with Luke Callahan while the town watched and, for the most part, approved. It wasn't quite acceptance. Redstone Hollow didn't change that quickly. But it was a beginning, and beginnings, Clara had learned, were precious things indeed. The dance ended, but Luke didn't let go. "Walk you home." "Always," she said, and meant it. They left together, her hand in his, no longer caring who saw or what they'd say. Behind them, the church glowed with warmth and community. Ahead, the path to Hattie's house stretched beneath stars that seemed to shine with possibility. Clara had come to Redstone Hollow running from heartbreak. But sometimes, she thought as Luke squeezed her hand, you had to break completely before you could heal properly. And healing, as any good nurse knew, was its own kind of miracle. The morning sun painted Redstone Hollow in shades of gold and rust as Clara stood before the small building on 2nd Street. It had been a feed store once, abandoned when the owner moved to California. Now, with fresh whitewash and real glass windows, it would be something else entirely. "It's perfect," she breathed. Luke grinned beside her, paint still speckling his hands from the work. "Wait until you see inside." The door, painted a cheerful blue, swung open on well-oiled hinges. Inside, sunlight streamed through clean windows, illuminating a space transformed. The front room held a waiting area with simple chairs and a small desk. Beyond, a treatment room with a proper examination table, cabinets for supplies, and shelves already stocked with medicine bottles and bandages. "Luke, how did you—" "Wasn't just me." He gestured toward the back room. "Go look." She found them there, Hattie, the Martinez family, Daniel Washington and his father, Mrs. Chen, and a dozen others. They stood around a table laden with food, faces bright with pride. "Surprise," Hattie beamed. "Every proper nurse needs a proper clinic." Clara's eyes filled. "I don't understand. The cost?" "Community effort." Jim Washington said gruffly, "I did the metalwork. Chen's provided fabric for curtains. Martinez family handled the painting. Everyone contributed what they could. Even got something from an unexpected source." Daniel produced an envelope. "Dr. Pritchard sent this." Inside was a banknote and a brief message. "For medical supplies. A proper partnership requires proper equipment. J. Pritchard." "And this?" "Mrs." Chen stepped forward with a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a simple brass plaque. C. Evers, R.N. All welcome. Clara traced the letters with trembling fingers. Her own clinic, her own practice. After everything, the rejection, The fire, the town meeting, she had this. There's more, Luke said quietly. Out back. Behind the clinic stood a small adobe house, barely more than 2 rooms, but solid and clean. A kitchen garden had been started, and someone had even built a chicken coop. Can't have you living at Hattie's forever, Luke explained. This way, you're close to your patients. And closer to other things, Hattie added with a knowing smile. Clara turned to face them, all these people who'd gone from suspicion to acceptance, from cruelty to kindness. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay. Martha Sullivan spoke from the doorway. She'd arrived late, flour in her hair from morning baking. Say you'll keep being here when we need you. I'll stay, Clara promised. For as long as you'll have me. The celebration lasted into afternoon, neighbors bringing more food, sharing stories, blessing the new clinic with their presence. Even some who'd been coldest during the winter troubles appeared Mrs. McKinnon dropped off a set of clean linens for the examination table, and Reverend Aldridge contributed a small bell for the door. As evening approached and the crowd thinned, Clara found herself alone with Luke in the little house. They stood in the main room, golden light slanting through windows she'd never dreamed of having. It's too much, she said softly. I can't accept all this. It's exactly enough. Luke moved closer. And you've already accepted it. The community did this because they want you here. Clara, not out of charity, but out of need, out of respect. And you, she looked up at him. What do you want? His hands framed her face gently. I want to court you properly. Want to walk you home from your clinic every evening. Want to bring you flowers on Sundays and sit beside you at church. Want to give you time to trust me, to believe that some things last. And then, when you're ready, whether that's next month or next year or never, I want to marry you. Want to turn that little house into our home. Want to wake up every morning knowing you're there, saving lives and healing hearts and making this town better just by being in it. Clara's heart raced. That's a lot of wanting. I'm a patient man. I can wait. What if I'm never ready? What if I can't? Then we'll find another way. His certainty was unwavering. Clara, I don't need a wedding to know what we have, but I hope, that someday you'll want it too. Not because the town expects it, but because you'll know I'm not going anywhere. Ever. She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and hope and growing trust into the connection. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. I want to try, she whispered, to trust, to believe, to let you court me properly, as you said. Luke's smile could have lit the desert. That's all I ask. They were interrupted by a knock. Hattie, come to see the house and pretend she wasn't checking on them. Proper distance, you two, she said with mock sternness. This town's accepting, Clara, but let's not push our luck. Over the following weeks, Luke kept his word. He courted her with old-fashioned determination flowers on Sundays, walks after church, suppers at Hattie's with proper chaperoning. The town watched with interest ranging from approving to amused, but the cruel whispers had died. Clara's clinic thrived. The partnership with Dr. Pritchard worked better than either had expected. He handled the wealthy patients. She took those who paid in eggs or promises, and they consulted on difficult cases. More importantly, he'd stopped seeing her as competition and started seeing her as an asset. You've changed this place, he told her one afternoon as they reviewed a patient's treatment. Made us better, even made me better, though Lord knows I resisted. Spring mellowed into summer, and with it came a sense of permanence Clara had never expected. She had a home, work that mattered, a community that had grown to accept her, and a man who loved her steadily and completely. The night Luke proposed properly, on one knee in her little garden, ring bought with months of saved wages, Clara surprised herself by saying yes immediately. No doubts, he asked, sliding the simple band onto her finger. No doubts, she confirmed. You've shown me every day that you're nothing like what I ran from. You've let me be myself, supported my work, never asked me to be less than I am. Why would I want you to be less when you're already everything? They married in September, Reverend Aldridge performing the ceremony as promised. The church was packed not just with the expected faces, but with all of Redstone Hollow, the Mexican families, the colored community, the miners, the ranchers, even some of the saloon girls slipping in the back. All welcome, as Clara's sign promised. Hattie stood as her witness, tears streaming down weathered cheeks. "About time," she muttered. "Thought I'd die of old age waiting for you two to figure it out." The reception spilled onto the church grounds, tables groaning under the weight of a true community feast. Clara stood with Luke, watching their neighbors celebrate, and marveled at how much had changed since she'd stepped off that stagecoach, desperate and alone. "Regrets?" Luke asked, reading her thoughtfulness. "No." Clara leaned into his strength. "It was hard, all of it. The rejection, the fear, the fire. But it brought me here. Brought me you. Brought me home." As if to underscore her words, Tommy Martinez ran up, proudly showing off his healed scar. Mrs. Callahan look all better, just like you said." She knelt to examine it. "Doctor, even on her wedding day. Perfect healing. You'll have a story to tell." "About the best nurse in the territory." He scampered off, and Clara rose to find Luke watching her with soft eyes. "What?" "Nothing. Just loving my wife." Wife. The word that had once terrified her now felt right, like a coat tailored to fit, because Luke hadn't asked her to stop being Clara Evers. Dedicated nurse. He'd simply asked to add to who she was: beloved wife, valued community member, woman with a future as bright as the desert stars. That night, in their little house behind the clinic, Clara unpacked the last of her belonging. From her carpet bag, the same one she'd carried from Kansas, she withdrew her mother's Bible and her nursing certificate. She placed them on the shelf Luke had built, right where she could see them every day. "No more running," she said softly. "No more being alone," Luke added, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Outside, Redstone Hollow settled into evening quiet, but Clara knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, patients to treat, lives to save, probably some fresh crisis only she could handle. The difference was, now she'd face them with roots deep in the desert soil and a partner by her side. She'd come seeking a job and refuge. She'd found a calling and a home, and in a town that had tried to break her, she'd discovered she was unbreakable. Through the window, the brass bell on the clinic door caught the last of the sunset, gleaming like a promise. Tomorrow it would ring with those needing help, and Clara would answer, not because she had to anymore, but because this was who she was: healer, wife, neighbor, friend. Clara Callahan, formerly Evers, once of Kansas and now forever of Redstone Hollow. Finally, blessedly, home. And for the first time in her life, she knew with absolute certainty she would never sleep alone again. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, resilience, and finding home in the most unexpected places. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss Clara and Luke's journey together. If you enjoyed this tale from the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of the Old West. Your support means everything and keeps these tales alive for listeners around the world.